Okay, quickly, immediately after this. So here, and the first paragraph is about today and how the beginnings of today's third space goes to 16th century. Second paragraph about the context. Totality of the second paragraph is the context, and okay, here is Habermas and the British coffee house that Habermas wrote about. Then we go back to today's consumer culture. Third paragraph, today's consumer culture consumption studies. Generally portray consumers as subjects who actively negotiate and transform market-mediated meetings, the active consumer, okay, which is dominant in CCT, consumer culture studies, consumption studies, to define and express their identities and social relations. So this is what we have today. Today's literature, agentic consumer. In lots of contemporary contexts, you have this. So this is something you see in all of these papers, the agentic consumer. And then we say, how did early modern people, 400 years ago, supposedly tied to prescriptions, you know, think about pre-modernity. What is pre-modernity? People behave according to traditions, and according to their class, there are sumptuary laws, and they're prescribed. You know, different ethnic groups are prescribed to wear different things. You're prescribed to do like this, to dress this, etc. So you're not supposed. Modernity, individuality, and individual choice comes with modernity in general modernity literature. So people before modernity are not supposed to be active in our mindset. That's the definition of modernity. You know, in the pre-modern times, tradition determined how people acted. In modern times, choice determines how people act, enlightenment, etc. So how is it supposedly tied to prescriptions, move from such prescribed manners of consumption and negotiated and at least, you know, partially were agentic? How did this agency that is supposed to be a modern condition happen 400 years ago? So not only have we related the context to the current day issues, we've also hopefully raised some curiosity with this sentence. And then the paper goes on. By this point, we have sold the paper, basically. I mean, the most important part of a paper is the first 2 pages and the last 2 pages. Okay, if you can have the reader stick with your paper after the first 2 pages, great. And then at the end, if you can show them, oh, I learned something, great. So first part has to get them curious, interested. They have to think that it's relevant. And they wonder. You increase some wonderment. And at the end, you have to sort of satisfy that wonderment.
But this paper, it's quite complex and intriguing in a certain way, because if you take the contribution to the discussion as it's occurring now, is this relation between the market and the consumers, and how when they are aligned together, they create resistance. So it's a resistance paper in the regular sense.
Yes.
But as you build it, you create this positioning more focused on the historical perspective, like explaining the coffee and how it's related to something that's not only at this point, that is connected to something previous, and even reconstructing the way we understand this history, the way we see history. So you clearly made a choice to position the historical importance of the paper instead of the actual debate.
Resistance. No, the actual debate is hidden in this active word. Because where's Taiza? Like we were discussing this in class one day, resistance is a way of showing the agency of the consumer. So resistance is actually a subcategory of active consumption. Now, being active is broader than just resistance. So we do this in order not to restrict the paper to a resistance paper. The active consumer subject includes resistance, but other things. Resistance is a way we prove our point in this case. That's one. I have multiple responses to you. The second is my co-author Emine Gül. This is Emine Gül. She decided to make a career for herself based on bringing history into marketing. So she made that decision as a PhD student. Therefore, she wanted the historical part and historical analysis to be dominant. That's her decision. And that's a strategy for her, okay? And, you know, she's doing pretty well. I just saw on Facebook, and if you're on Facebook with the ACR, Association of Consumer Research Community, I was really proud when I saw this. Apparently, she gave a talk, a prestigious talk to selected PhD students selected by their institutions to participate in this on historical analysis. And Marcus Giesler posted this thing that she is passionately presenting and convincing everybody, etc. And she has been doing this all around the world in different venues, and you know, she's going to be writing more about this. This is going to be her impact. This is going to be her footprint.
So this is interesting because not only the paper alone, but also how do you, as a researcher,
yes, position yourself exactly.
In long term.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes?
I have a question about just comparing the previous paper used. We know that Cosnet's article is famous, so the audience
knows it.
Know.
Mm-hmm.
Which, thinking about this paper, is it possible to know how what papers are known by the audience?
Yes. Yes. How?
Would you suggest or recommend that the audience should be aware of before getting into this paper? For example, maybe Habermas. One should be aware of Habermas.
Yes.
A little.
Yes. Yes.
But
exactly.
Not every reference you have.
Exactly.
How can we, as writing, can distinguish this?
How you introduce them. I mean, if we go back to this, so this is a generally accepted premise. So people are not gonna look into these references to figure out if this is true or not. They sort of already know this. But then, you know, look at this bit. Some are local, defined by anti-corporate discourses or hybridization of global and local forms. So here we're signaling that there's going to be something about discourses, something that relates to the third space and discourse situation. And the links between the continuities and ruptures, this is an idea from Foucault. So if somebody knows Foucault, they know that we're using Foucault, not engaging, we're using Foucault. And here is somebody who engaged with Foucault and looked at the development of coffee houses, actually. And then here is your Habermas. How do I? Okay, there we go. Why can't I just go to the page? jumped all too quickly. I'm looking for one thing and I can't see it here. There, now it's working. The thing that I'm looking for is poster. Where is poster? What was important in convincing the reviewers in this paper was
I guess it was the first page.
poster was on the first page. Where is poster? This is Habermas. I don't see poster. Does anybody see poster anywhere? Where are the research questions?
I guess in the first page.
Anyways, I can't find it. Poster is a very well-respected sociologist, I suppose. Okay, thank you. So, Poster is extremely well respected in the readership, among the readers. So, you know, we use Poster to justify the existence of the paper. This literature does not explain. So, even if you don't believe us, because this is a history of consumer culture literature. So, this bit, the readers do not know. And we know that they do not know. Because it's history. It's history of consumer culture, but it's still history. So even if you don't believe this, you know Poster. Everybody knows Poster. Poster says that this literature does not explain if and how the consuming subject was formed during the development of consumer culture. So there is historical work on development of consumer culture, but nobody explains how the consuming subject was formed during that time. It supposes a rather passive consuming subject. Okay? So this literature assumes a passive subject. We show the emergence of an active subject while everybody else was talking about how consumer culture emerged. And going back to you, so resistance is again one way of showing this non-passive consumer. So how do you do it exactly? It's that dialogue that I keep talking about. You know, dialogue with the reviewers, you write, you see what the reviewers understand and what they don't understand. So you elaborate some things and you shorten some other things. It's based on, you know, you're writing a paper for 4 people initially. Don't forget this. The reviewer, 3 reviewers and the editor. If you're trying to make them understand and believe and get excited about your work, and you assume that if they know things, all the others know. If they don't know, all the others don't know either. And they tell you, they say, I happen to have read Mukherjee, but typically in our field nobody does. So explain what Mukherjee found. They tell you what the readers are not likely to know. This is not, the first time I sit and write. This is after 4 or 5 rounds. Okay. The middle. Before this one, I want to get to the cassette paper. So this is Alev Kuruoğlu, who is now a faculty member in Odense, Southern Denmark University. And this paper, initially we wrote it as a materiality paper, materiality of music, for Journal of Material Culture, and it was rejected, plain out rejected. And then we read it, reading the rejection letter carefully. And after a few cycles at the Consumption Markets Culture Journal, it was accepted and it won the Best Paper Award. So everything happens, you just take it and move on, take it and move on. So let's look at the first page of this paper. Oh, the abstract is also very, very, very important. No, we spend, after the paper is accepted, we spend at least a full day on writing the abstract. Because reviewers read your paper very carefully, but most readers are like me. I read the abstract. If I am interested, I read the rest. If not, that's the end of it. And at best, I'll read the first page and the last page, and that's the end of it. So you've got to really be able to write an excellent abstract. I mean, let's look at the abstract in this one. So we're telling what the reader will learn from this. Affective potentialities of objects. So we're looking at materials. We're not saying materiality, but we're saying objects to make the language more poetic. This co-author, Alev Kuroğlu, is an amazing writer, and she's just an amazing writer in all kinds of languages. So we're looking at affective potentialities of material things. So you get the idea that we're going to put emotionality with materiality together. So first sentence about the theory that we're contributing, the understanding, explanation we're contributing. Then the context. We examine the circulation of Kurdish music cassettes in Turkey during the restrictive and strife-laden period of 70s, 80s, 90s. Not contemporary. Not contemporary. We find that the practices comprising circulation, here are the practices we find: recording, hiding, playing, exchanging, constituted tactical resistance and generated communal imaginaries. So an informed reader knows that we will be using de Sartre, and we will be using Anderson, Benedict Anderson, and others who came after him on communal imaginaries. We eliminate the emotional economy that is animated by a mundane object. The mundanity is very important here. This is not an extraordinary spiritual object. This is a mundane object. And the interestingness comes from its mundanity, from its ordinariness.
And with that you point to sacred objects?
Yes, exactly. Now, sacred objects are, of course, affective by definition. This is by definition mundane. The cassette, through its circulation, becomes saturated with emotions, establishes shared emotional repertoires, and habituates individuals. Who does that make you think? Bourdieu, yes. Collectivities into common emotional dispositions. Okay. Cassettes thus play a part in shaping and reinforcing an emotional habitus. Emotional habitus that accompanies the emergence of a sense of us and the delineation of the other. And what does that tell you, the us and the other? Communities and resistance, fights, struggles across communities, and the relationship between the two. Thus, we demonstrate the entwinement of materiality and emotions and examine how this entwinement generates emotional structures that shape and perpetuate the imagining of a community as well as the enactment of resistance. Is this a phenomenological paper? No. Because even though we're looking at something as micro as emotions, we're looking at how this entwinement creates emotional structures that construct the imagining of a community as well as enactment of resistance. So we're going to be talking about resistance in community, structuring of emotions in light of the emotion materiality interchange, interplay.
It's just on emotional habitus is something that you are proposing.
No, somebody else used the term first. I forget now who. We cite them in the paper. I think it's Güliz Ger and Bilge Saatçıoğlu. They did a paper on the poor consumers in the bus-like thing. What do you call them? Trailer. I think they use. I'm not sure. Maybe it was moral habitus. Maybe we introduced the term. I don't remember.
No, I'm just asking because of the keywords.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the keywords are very generic. Reality, emotions, circulation, community, resistance, and it felt that emotional habitus would be your conceptual.
Maybe it was.
That you wanted
I
to
don't remember everything. Maybe it was habitus. Let's see. Now this is the first one. Proxima, right?
Yeah, next.
This term has been used by several scholars, Calhoun, Gold, Illus, Kane. So we're not the ones who use it. By the way, for those of you interested in Bourdieu, do you know Calhoun's work? He is the most prominent sociologist who extends Bourdieu's work. American. Okay. Any other comments? Thoughts? And please note that each paper does things a little differently. There's no formula, like sometimes people ask me, how do you do it? I don't know, it's really trial and error. It happens in the process. This starts completely different than the others. Boom, with the context. Performing, broadcasting, selling music with Kurdish language lyrics were restricted in Turkey throughout most of the 20th century. Yet cassette technology, starting from the mid-70s and overlapping with the escalation of ethnic strife and violence, brought vitality to the underground music scene. So the whole paragraph is
in the form of a tale, not in the form of the description of the context. It's not
in the form of
a tale.
Yes. Yes. So why did we do that? What's the function of that first paragraph? Why can't I show what I want to show? Well, you're not going to be, I won't be able to show you the whole thing.
Click with the cursor on the top of the text because maybe it was elsewhere.
No.
There. And then you
I
go
did
down with
this
the arrow.
just a little bit. It's not, see, nothing.
That's what you need?
That's what I need. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So it's in the form of a tale. Yes, it's a tale that, remember, this paper is going to talk about emotional economy. Yes, please. It's going to talk about emotional economy. So what does this first paragraph do? Let me read you a few other things. Anyone in possession of a tape recorder was able to become a brave producer, as well as a consumer of dissident music. Cassettes were copiously recorded in homes, smuggled across borders, duplicated, hidden in dowry chests, buried underground. They were buried underground because the police in the 60s, 70s, 80s were searching for these cassettes because they were subversive, resistive. So people buried them so that the police would not find them. And then years later, when they unburied them, of course, they were all rotten. But this burying stories abound. Sold under the counter, shrouded by covers of Turkish pop. You know, the cassettes were covered with other kinds of music labels. Played behind closed doors, children standing guard in the hallways and door throats, with an exit plan in place for what to do with the cassettes if authorities dropped in. So, where are you right now? What do you feel?
There.
You're there, and you're feeling something, right? You're already feeling something. So it's putting the story of the context in a story which invites the reader into the context. Okay. Then what?
It's a romance.
It's a romance, yes. So more than we take cassettes. Okay, while music, in its evocative glory, may seem to be the glue that sticks these people, places experiences together, the unsung hero of the story is a thing that transcends its mundaneness. So it's obvious that music can evoke feelings. This is not new. But here, in this paper, what we're going to focus on is the thing, the stupid cassette itself, and not the music. Because we know music evokes feelings. But we're going to focus on this thing, the mundane thing. In this interpretive study, we examine how a commodity, such as a cassette, plays a vital part through its circulation in generating community and resistance.
At this moment, when you submit, Jonathan Schroeder was the editor?
Yes.
Yes, because I guess this is interesting because I could not imagine a JCR paper start like that. I believe CMC is more
open to
global,
this.
to different contexts. And Jonathan Schroeder loves music.
Yes, yes,
So the
yes.
materiality and music and below play format, I mean, something that he's studying. So
That's true.
That's you something that you mentioned before. That a
You're
paper
speaking
start
to the editor,
editors
yeah.
and think about the reviewers, knowing the editor and the profile and what kind of
Yes.
interest. It's something important to the lineage.
You
also.
could write this to JCR if John Dayton were the editor, for example. John Dayton was also a person interested in the arts and music, etc. Or Morris Holbrook, if Morris were an editor. So don't put it in your mind as JCR versus CMC. CMC under which editor? JCR under which editor? It depends on the particular editorial team rather than the journal as much.
It's a study you have to improve more. I mean, being familiar with the authors and the editors.
Yes. What does that imply? What do you need to do that?
It's a kind of a strategic how to publish now.
Yeah, but how do you do that? How do you make yourself familiar?
Read them.
Read,
Yes.
read their statements, go to conferences, and at conferences do what?
Talk to them.
Talk to them. Before I published any of these things in JCR, John Dayton was the editor, and I was not even on the editorial board at the time. JCR used me just as a reviewer, occasional. There are these technical terms. Occasional reviewer is somebody who reviews from time to time. If the editor thinks you're valuable enough and if you've published enough in JCR, by invitation you become an editorial board member, which means you get a paper once every other month. I was an occasional reviewer, not even on the editorial board. The only JCR I had was Fire of Desire, nothing else. And I saw John Dayton, and at the time I was adamant on something I've been talking with the COPPEAD colleagues here, that there should be more voice from the periphery in JCR rather than just North America. And somebody said, here's John Dayton. I didn't even know the guy. I just went up to him during the coffee break. I introduced myself, and I really liked what he did with JCR, by the way. So I started out saying, you know, I must say I'm happy with your editorship. You know, I think you've done really good things, because he's not a culture person, but he opened doors for culture kinds of studies, and he was extremely open-minded. So I started with that, and then I said, there's still something else you need to do, you know. And that is publish paper from not North America, you know, other places. He'd never thought about that. He said, we're having lunch with the editorial board members. Why don't you join us and sit next to me? The whole lunch topic was about this. You know, I'm not generally a person who pushes for my self-interest, but I can push for other people's interests. I find the courage to push, to be obnoxious when it is on the case of other people rather than myself. And then from this point on, he and I became good friends. So going to a conference is nothing, okay? If you're invisible, you better not go. Why waste the money? If you go, make a difference. Speak up.